Let's begin with a truth that many couples quietly resist. The person you fell in love with will not remain the same, and neither will you. Growth is not optional. It is the fundamental condition of being alive. Our beliefs evolve, our ambitions shift, our wounds heal, or sometimes deepen. We gather new experiences, new disappointments, new desires. Yet, in romantic relationships, we often cling to an unspoken contract. Stay the way you were when I chose you. This is where many couples begin to drift apart. Not because they are incompatible, not because love has vanished, but because one person's evolution feels like a threat to the other. The psychotherapist Esther Perel often speaks about the tension between love and desire, between security and freedom. We want the comfort of the familiar, yet we are drawn to vitality, growth, aliveness. In long-term partnerships, this tension becomes especially pronounced. When your partner begins to change, perhaps they develop new interests, new confidence, new social circles, it can stir anxiety, and anxiety often disguises itself as criticism. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. You used to care about us more. But beneath these accusations is often a quieter fear. Where do I fit in this new version of you? When one partner grows, emotionally, professionally, spiritually, the other may experience that growth as distance. If I no longer recognize you, will I still belong to you? If you become more independent, will you still need me? This is where emotional maturity becomes essential. To grow together instead of apart, we must learn to interpret change not as abandonment, but as expansion. Your partner's evolution does not automatically signal rejection. It may simply reflect their unfolding. Think about the alternative. If neither of you changed over 10 or 20 years, what would that imply? Stagnation, suppression, a quiet shrinking of self to preserve comfort. And yet, many relationships unconsciously reward stagnation because it feels predictable. When you fell in love, you chose a person, but you also chose a trajectory. You chose someone mid-journey. To love them authentically means loving not only who they were, but who they are becoming. This requires flexibility in identity. If you define your partner rigidly, she's the shy one, he's the ambitious one, she's not the adventurous type. You limit their capacity to evolve. And when they inevitably outgrow those definitions, tension emerges. Instead, what if we approached our partners with curiosity about their growth? Instead of saying, "You've changed," we might ask, "What's emerging in you right now?" This subtle shift transforms threat into dialogue. Of course, this does not mean ignoring legitimate concerns. Sometimes growth does reveal divergence in values or priorities, but even then, the conversation becomes more honest. Are we willing to adapt? Can we renegotiate our shared vision, or are we silently hoping the other will revert to an earlier version for our comfort? Loving someone while they grow demands inner security. If your sense of worth depends entirely on your partner staying dependent, then their autonomy will feel destabilizing. But if your identity is rooted within yourself, their expansion can inspire rather than intimidate you. In fact, growth can become contagious. When one partner pursues therapy, education, creativity, or new challenges, it often invites the other to examine their own life. Growth becomes a shared culture rather than a solitary act. But this requires openness. It requires saying, "I see you changing, tell me about it," instead of, "I see you changing, come back." And here is something crucial. Supporting your partner's evolution does not mean losing yourself. Growing together is not about merging into one indistinguishable identity. It is about allowing two distinct individuals to expand while maintaining emotional connection. The paradox is this: the more secure each person feels in their individual development, the stronger the partnership becomes. When both partners are encouraged to evolve, the relationship remains dynamic. There is continual rediscovery. You fall in love not once, but repeatedly, with new dimensions of the same person. Ask yourself honestly, when my partner begins to change, do I lean in with curiosity or pull back with fear? Do I celebrate their growth or subtly undermine it to restore familiarity? Because relationships rarely collapse from change itself. They fracture when change is resisted. To grow together, you must accept that love is not about freezing time. It is about walking beside someone as time transforms you both. The goal is not to remain the same. The goal is to remain connected while becoming more. If growth is inevitable, and if we agree to let our partners evolve without interpreting that evolution as threat, then the next challenge becomes this: how do we stay connected to who they are becoming? The answer is surprisingly simple, and yet profoundly difficult. We must remain curious. One of the quietest dangers in long-term relationships is certainty. Not conflict, not incompatibility, certainty. The moment we believe we fully know our partner, intimacy begins to narrow. We stop asking questions, we stop exploring, we begin relating not to the person in front of us, but to the version of them we have stored in our mind. And over time, that stored version becomes outdated. The psychotherapist Esther Perel often speaks about how desire requires mystery. But mystery does not mean secrecy. It means recognizing that the person you love has an inner world that is never fully accessible, never fully finished. There is always more to discover, if you are willing to look. Curiosity is an act of humility. It says, I do not presume to know all of you. In the early stages of love, curiosity is effortless. We ask endless questions. We want to know about childhood stories, private fears, secret dreams. We listen closely. We are attentive to nuance. But as familiarity grows, we replace curiosity with assumption. She doesn't like change. He's not emotional. She's always stressed. He never wants to talk. These statements feel factual, but they are often outdated conclusions. They freeze a person in time, and when someone feels frozen by your perception, they begin to feel unseen. Growing together instead of apart requires a discipline of ongoing inquiry, not interrogation, inquiry, a gentle, consistent interest in your partner's evolving inner life. What has been on your mind lately? What feels different about this season of your life? What are you questioning right now? These are not dramatic questions. They are invitations. And invitations communicate value. When curiosity disappears, distance creeps in quietly. You may still share a home, routines, responsibilities, but the emotional landscape begins to flatten. Conversations become logistical rather than exploratory. How was your day? Becomes a ritual rather than a doorway. Curiosity transforms that doorway back into discovery. It also prevents a subtle but powerful dynamic, projection. When we stop asking questions, we start filling in the blanks. If your partner seems distant, you may assume disinterest. If they seem quiet, you may assume resentment. Without curiosity, imagination takes over, and imagination is often guided by fear. Curiosity interrupts fear. Instead of concluding, you ask. Instead of reacting to a story in your mind, you seek clarity from the person in front of you. There is also something deeply intimate about being asked meaningful questions. It signals, your interior life matters to me. Many people do not grow apart because they fall out of love. They grow apart because they feel unknown. To remain curious requires vulnerability. You might discover changes that unsettle you. You might hear aspirations that challenge your shared plans, but avoiding that knowledge does not preserve closeness. It merely delays disconnection. Curiosity also demands presence. In a world saturated with distraction, attention has become one of the rarest gifts. To look at your partner and truly listen, without preparing your response, without checking your phone, is an act of devotion. And curiosity must be reciprocal. If only one partner remains interested while the other retreats into assumption, imbalance forms. Growing together means both people stay engaged in the unfolding story of the other. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time I learned something new about my partner? Not a logistical detail, something internal, a fear, a desire, a doubt. If you cannot remember, that is not a condemnation. It is an invitation. Because curiosity is not a personality trait, it is a choice. It is choosing to believe that even after years together, there is more beneath the surface. It is choosing to see your partner as dynamic rather than defined. And here is the paradox. The more you recognize that you do not fully know your partner, the closer you feel to them. Certainty closes the door. Curiosity keeps it open. So if you wish to grow together instead of apart, resist the comfort of assumption. Stay interested, stay attentive, keep asking, because love does not fade from lack of time, it fades from lack of discovery. If we accept that growth is inevitable, that curiosity must remain alive, and that shared meaning must be consciously built, then we arrive at the final and perhaps most delicate challenge: recognizing distance while it is still small. Relationships rarely collapse overnight, they erode quietly. Distance does not usually begin with dramatic betrayal or explosive conflict. It begins with subtle omissions, a conversation postponed, a frustration swallowed, a moment of vulnerability dismissed because it felt inconvenient. Over time, these micro moments accumulate, and what once felt like closeness begins to feel like coexistence. The psychotherapist Esther Perel often reminds us that the quality of our relationships is determined not by the absence of rupture, but by the presence of repair. In the context of growing together, this principle becomes even more essential. It is not distance itself that destroys intimacy, it is unaddressed distance. The problem is that subtle drift is easy to rationalize. We're just busy. It's just a phase. We'll reconnect later. But later has a way of stretching into months, even years. Emotional distance often disguises itself as normalcy. You still manage logistics, you still fulfill responsibilities, you may even appear harmonious, yet something essential has thinned. Conversations become efficient rather than expansive. Touch becomes habitual rather than intentional. Laughter becomes rarer, and because nothing is dramatically wrong, nothing feels urgent. This is where courage becomes critical. To grow together instead of apart requires the willingness to name distance early, not accusingly, not dramatically, simply, honestly. I feel like we've been missing each other lately. I notice we haven't talked deeply in a while. I miss feeling close to you. These statements are vulnerable. They risk rejection. They risk hearing that your partner does not feel the same. But silence carries a greater risk. Quiet resignation. Addressing distance early prevents resentment from crystallizing. Once resentment hardens, curiosity diminishes. When curiosity diminishes, shared meaning weakens. And eventually, two people can wake up beside each other, feeling like strangers. Distance is not only emotional, it can also be aspirational. If one partner begins pursuing new ambitions without dialogue, and the other quietly feels left behind, separation grows invisibly. If one partner struggles internally and does not feel safe sharing it, isolation forms inside the relationship itself. The antidote is not constant intensity, it is intentional check-in. Think of emotional connection as something that requires maintenance. Just as you would not ignore a subtle noise in a car engine for years, you cannot ignore subtle relational signals indefinitely. The earlier you attend to them, the less drastic the intervention required. And here is something important. Addressing distance is not about blame. It is about stewardship. The relationship is not self-sustaining. It is a living system. And living systems require attention. Sometimes, when distance is named, the response may surprise you. Your partner may feel it too, but was afraid to articulate it. Often, both people sense the drift, but wait for the other to initiate. Whoever speaks first is not weaker, they are braver. Growing together also requires repairing small ruptures quickly. A sarcastic comment left unaddressed, a forgotten promise brushed aside, a moment of defensiveness that lingers. When these micro ruptures are acknowledged early, I didn't like how that felt. I think I was dismissive just now. They dissolve before becoming stories. Because unspoken stories are powerful. If you repeatedly feel unheard and say nothing, a narrative forms, I don't matter. If your partner feels consistently criticized and remains silent, their narrative may become, I can't win. Left unchecked, these narratives define the relationship more than the reality does. To prevent this, we must be willing to disrupt comfort with honesty. And honesty does not require aggression, it requires presence. Ask yourself, have I been fully present in this relationship lately? Or have I allowed distraction, stress, or complacency to create space between us? When I sense distance, do I confront it gently, or do I wait for it to grow? Distance addressed early becomes dialogue. Distance ignored becomes disconnection. The goal is not perfection. There will be seasons of busyness, fatigue, even emotional withdrawal. But what differentiates couples who grow together from those who grow apart is responsiveness. They notice, they speak, they adjust. They do not assume closeness will maintain itself. In the end, growing together is less about dramatic gestures and more about consistent attentiveness. It is about refusing to let small gaps widen unnoticed. It is about choosing engagement over avoidance again and again, because separation rarely begins with a single step away. It begins with the steps we fail to take toward each other. The psychotherapist Esther Perel often speaks about the dynamic between me, you, and us. Healthy love requires all three. If me disappears, resentment forms. If us disappears, distance grows. Building shared meaning is the work of consciously strengthening the us. Shared meaning is not accidental, it is cultivated. It emerges from conversations about values, priorities, dreams, and direction. It is built through rituals, shared projects, mutual challenges, and collective decisions. Without shared meaning, a relationship becomes purely functional. You manage responsibilities, you coordinate schedules, you solve practical problems. But emotionally, you are living parallel lives, and parallel lives eventually drift. To build shared meaning, couples must periodically ask, where are we going? What matters to us as a unit? What kind of life are we intentionally creating? These are not questions to answer once at the beginning and forget. As individuals evolve, the shared vision must also evolve. For example, early in a relationship, the shared meaning may revolve around building stability, careers, home, financial security. Later, it may shift toward adventure, legacy, contribution, creativity, or family. If these shifts are not discussed consciously, one partner may move toward a new horizon while the other remains oriented toward the old one, and that silent misalignment breeds quiet frustration. Shared meaning also includes shared rituals, small consistent practices that reinforce connection, a weekly walk, a monthly reflection conversation, a shared hobby, even a nightly check-in that goes beyond logistics. Rituals may seem simple, but they create psychological anchoring. They remind both partners, we are not only individuals, we are a team. But here is where nuance becomes important. Building shared meaning does not require identical passions or identical personalities. It does not mean merging identities or sacrificing individuality. In fact, shared meaning is strongest when it is built by two distinct individuals who consciously choose alignment. If one partner feels pressured to abandon personal purpose for the sake of the relationship, resentment grows quietly. If the relationship demands constant compromise without mutual vision, it becomes restrictive rather than supportive. The balance is delicate. The relationship should not replace personal purpose. It should support and integrate it. Ask yourself, do we talk about our individual goals in isolation, or do we explore how they intersect? When one of us dreams, does the other ask, how does this fit into our life together? Or how do we make space for this within us? Growing together means weaving individual aspirations into a shared narrative. It also means periodically recalibrating. There are seasons in relationships, seasons of ambition, seasons of rest, seasons of crisis, seasons of reinvention. If one partner enters a new season, perhaps career transition, spiritual exploration, personal transformation, and the other remains anchored in an old rhythm, tension emerges. But tension is not the enemy. Silence is. The couples who grow together are not those who avoid divergence. They are those who articulate it early. They say, I feel pulled in a new direction. Can we talk about what this means for us? This conversation requires courage. It may reveal uncomfortable truths. It may require negotiation, but it prevents the slow erosion that occurs when two lives quietly separate under the same roof. There is also a deeper philosophical layer here. Human beings long for belonging and significance. A powerful partnership offers both. It provides a sense that we are building something that matters. That sense of shared construction, whether it is a family, a business, a creative endeavor, a community contribution, or simply a deeply intentional life, generates resilience. When conflict arises, Shared meaning acts as glue. It reminds both partners why they chose each other. Without it, disagreements feel heavier because there is no larger vision holding them. So consider this. If someone were to ask you and your partner separately, what are you building together? Would your answers align? If they would not, that is not a failure. It is an opportunity for dialogue. Growing together is not passive. It is designed. It requires returning, again and again, to the question of us. Because love that lasts is not only about chemistry or compatibility, it is about shared direction. And when two people consciously choose that direction together, growth becomes a shared journey rather than a silent departure.